I guess my first memories as a kid probably were in Houston, Texas. I was probably 5 years old. And I remember we lived in a kind of a run-down, poor neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was an alcoholic,
Mm-hmm.
abusive to everyone,
I see.
all kinds of ways abusive. And at one point, my mom took me and my sister, and off we went to Maui to see her mom. And while we were there, I ended up going to first and second grade in Maui, 1946, 1947, right after World War II. I had a lot of memories of a kid there. But basically, it was right after the war. It wasn't resort Maui, you know, it was, everyone was still, we had black lights in our house from afraid of air raids and stuff, and people were still running scared.
Right.
At that time. And but I remember going to the beach and changing in an old PT boat that had been sunk by the Japs. It was beached there, and just the Hulk was there, and we would go in there and change our clothes and put our swimsuits and go swimming. And I remember eating the shellfish and stuff like the Hawaiians right off the rocks, raw. There's a couple different ones we would get. I remember one of them was real tiny. I think they were opihis or something like that. Opihi might have been the bigger one. But I remember you put them in your shoe, and get a whole bunch of them, and then we'd take a toothpick to eat the little snails out. Oh. They were so tiny. So I went 2 years there. During that time, my mom had a nervous breakdown. The whole thing about the Catholic Church was about putting fear into you.
Uh-huh.
And my mom lived with fear and lived with demons all her life. Mm-hmm. And so, anyway, I didn't enjoy the Catholic Church as much, the Catholic Church or the school. I remember coming home, my mom was sitting in a dark room, and you couldn't talk to her. She was just like distant.
And
She
to
just
a
withdrawn.
child in third grade, that's...
And it was shortly after that, the white coat guys came and took her away. End of story.
Wow.
And shortly after that, within a couple of days, they came and took me and my sister away too, and put us in a foster home.
Oh.
So I ended up splitting the third grade. I started there with my aunt, but ended up finishing it with the foster home, which wasn't, there was no love in that. We were just used. I mean, we were just...
In the foster home?
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They had a little girl, I remember, and you could feel the love they had for their daughter, but you could feel that we weren't part of the family. So it wasn't a real comfortable place, but you got food and you got to do things and go to school. But on foster, I remember going to school with my feet sticking out of my shoes, because you only get one pair of shoes a year, and when you wear those out, foster parents don't buy you nothing out of their pocket. Anyway. Fortunately, they didn't like us anymore, and we liked them, I guess, and so we moved on. Their contract must have been for a year, and at the end of that school year, the next year, we found ourselves in another foster home. Only this was different. It was in the foothills of San Jose, an apricot ranch, and the family was nice. Ernest, his dad, I don't remember, they were Italian or Portuguese or Italian? I think Italian. But I remember slaughtering some pigs, and we did the Portuguese blood sausage and stuff, so maybe they were Portuguese.
You might think so if you're slaughtering
So
pigs,
that was
yeah.
like the fourth grade, and that's where I really came to life in school. I remember that. That was my only life. You know, I didn't have much of a family, and so, but I really started excelling in school, and all this time, my mom was in an institution, in an insane asylum, a nut ward, whatever. And when we'd visit her, which was very infrequent, I remember a few times in the couple of years she was there. She was in a cage behind the chain link fence the first time I saw her.
Oh my.
They wouldn't even let her out to see her kids. And then later on, I think, how long was she there? 2 years, 2 years in the foster home. She was allowed to go on the grounds, and we could actually, visit her normally. And she was okay, but she had no place to go and no one to take care of her. She was okay. She had these setbacks where she'd just go into withdrawals when things were tough for her, and she just didn't know how to cope with
That was
them.
her way of dealing with it.
And she'd just go into this state, and she was so religious. I mean, it drove her life and our life as much as she wanted it to or tried to. Anyway, so where was I? So my dad had been wandering around the world, a merchant seaman, and could care less about what we were doing at the time. Oh, actually, that's not true. He kept trying to get my mom. I remember he came to Hawaii once while we were there and tried to get her, and she called the sheriff on him and got him out of there. And then we came to my aunt's, and blah, blah, blah. My dad found her, traced her, and found her in an institution, and he was just, could care less about rules and regulations and law and stuff. And I told you, he was an abusive alcoholic. And so when he found where my mom was, he just went over there and put her in the car, and then he found out where we were, and he came over and threw us in the car, and under the pretense he was going to the picnic or something, and poof, off we went.
So he just
To Texas.
disregarded all
The formality of everything. But he put the family back together, so to speak. My sister and me were never separated during this time. And my mom came along, and we're back a family again. My dad was a merchant seaman, so he'd come and go, and that was our life with him. He'd see him for a while, and he usually came off a ship with a pocket full of money and a box full of whiskey, and he would just get drunk and obnoxious and throw his money away and have car accidents or hurt people or something, He was a rogue. He was just a wild, from a kid, he was a wild man. He was fearless, he would get in fights, he was a football player, and he was a good one. And my grandma loved football, and Texas football and boys.
Huge
It's just
down there, yeah.
And so I had to play when I was there too. And I loved it too. I was a great football player. Was a wide receiver.
Wide receiver.
The fastest guy on the team and had really good hands. I wasn't no Jerry Rice, but I was pretty good.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And football is everything down there, so.
Yeah. And I ran back the punts. I ran back the kickoffs.
Oh.
Yeah, I had the good hands, man. I could catch the ball and but I was small, and so they just beat me up, and I finally gave it up. I said, this ain't for me. But
So you could outrun them, but once they caught you.
once they caught me, I was hurt. I still hurt from football, from like in high school. I have arm pains and stuff, and I remember when that guy smashed me. I was going down the sideline, get the ball, and this guy nailed me. And I hurt for the rest of my life after that.
Still hurt.
So anyway, enough of that. I got into Future Farmers of America in Texas. I'm advancing myself out of Brownwood, actually. There was a little incident in Brownwood. My dad got in a lot of trouble. My mom grabbed my sister and I, and off we went again, run away from him. So we ended up in California again with my aunt again, the one who had put her in the institution.
Back in San Jose.
Back in San Jose, she had remarried and had a nicer home, but still, it was a pain for her to have her sister drag her family in again. And so, anyway, we're reestablishing. I remember starting the 8th grade. The first week, I'm starting school. I was out of school, walking down the street, and here's my dad, drives up.
Again.
Here he shows up again, So I get in the car with him, and I'm a little older and a little more afraid of him. So we drive around, he buys me an ice cream, what do you want? And he starts promising me stuff. One was a motorcycle. It got my attention.
Of course.
I wanted a motorcycle. Boy, I was like 11 years old. And so we drove around a while, and then he drove me over to the house, where my aunt's house, and he said, you go in there and get your stuff, and you come back, and I'm taking you to Texas with me. And he says, if you don't come back, I'm going to go in there and kill everybody in the house.
Wow.
And they had the guns in the car.
Talk about intimidation.
So I said, sure, Dad. And I went in and told my mom. My mom's crying. I get in the car, and off I go to Texas. And so anyway, we end up there. And on the way, he buys me a little motor scooter. It's a cheap old little Cushman thing, but he fulfilled his promise.
Came through on his promise.
Yeah, and we drug that out to the ranch, and I set up housekeeping there, helping my granddaddy out, and we raised cattle. And we could hunt. I had my little motor scooter, and I went to school there, and that's where I got into Future Farmers of America. It's about learning to farm, or raise cattle, or whatever you choose. Obviously Future Farmers, but your projects each year, you have to, first one you have to make $50, and then you have to make 500, and so on. So they're teaching you how to make money and manage your money and manage your resources, and and basically to get you started. And that's where I saw myself going, which didn't appeal to me at all. I mean, and I'm sitting in the middle of Texas. We had a paved road in front of our house, but the next neighbor was over a mile away, and then the next highway was like 3 miles away, and then the next little town had about 600 people, was 12 miles away or something, 15 miles away. Well, I ended up graduating from high school down there, actually, as I go on with this. So there I am, blah, blah, blah. My dad gets a wild hair. He wants to get the family back together. By this time, I left out some incidents about my sister, but my sister in Brownwood, when we ran away, my sister was like 16 or 15, or let's see, I was 11, 12, 3 years older. She was getting boobs, and she was looking good, and my dad, one day when she came in with a swimsuit on, reached into her top in front of everyone and says, "What's that material?" And it just freaked us all out. And we knew he was just a scoundrel, Anyway, she ran away, and unfortunately, that was the beginning of the rest of her life, because she ran away from, she just got into trouble, and I could go on about her, but I'll just bring things up because she'll come back into the picture, obviously, I hope. Anyway, there we was. My dad says he wants to get us back together again. My granddaddy died, that's right, while I was there. My granddaddy died. And he had health problems. And so that provoked my dad getting me out of there and getting my mom back. And then he ends up dragging me to Galveston, Texas, where we get a little apartment. And he has a whore, paid whore, staying with us. And he offers her to me.
Oh my.
Yeah.
And at what age was that?
I was 15. And I wanted to, but I didn't want to. I was one of those things. It was a real awkward situation. I mean, I'd love to have a woman, but not under those circumstances, And like in front of my dad with this prostitute. Anyway, so I didn't do that. I refused it. But the whole thing was sickening.
Right.
We lived in this place that had cockroaches that would set the mouse traps off, and that's how, how it was in a kind of alleyway where there was a Chinese restaurant down there, and the alley was, how that, you can just picture it. Anyway, it was temporary quarters while my mom was coming to Galveston. So here's my dad staying with a prostitute while he's got my mom coming out to meet us. And of course, I'm witnessing all this other stuff. So you can see how I feel, about my dad all along.
Yeah.
So my mom shows up, and he pretends everything's okay, and he gets a ship that's going to Seattle and then off to somewhere else. So he catches the ship, and we get on a train, and we go to Seattle, and he goes to Seattle, and we settled in Seattle. In the meantime, my sister is run off and doing her own thing. She ended up getting pregnant from a felon who ended up in the penitentiary. I don't know if he ever got out.
There in Texas?
No, in California.
Oh, in
San Quentin, I think.
Oh.
He was a bad actor, and my sister was bad too. She knew all about it. I mean, they did. I think he was armed robbery and that kind of stuff. You know, she was just a hard case by the time I saw her again. So we're in Galveston, and I started another school, right? Because I ended up with 14 schools before I got out of high school.
Man. Talking about being the new kid.
So I had to adapt a lot, and it really helped my life. Instead of it being a detriment, it was really a positive, because in my future, I didn't lean on anyone. I could handle situations better. I could walk into a strange situation and not be uncomfortable. And you know,
It taught you how to adapt quickly.
It helped me a lot in my future life. But as a kid, there was no stability at all. You know, I always had a classmate for a year, or 6 months, or in some school that really never made a friend before I was out of there.
That's rough.
Yeah. Anyhow, no, I didn't feel bad about it, just the way it was. But so we ended up in Seattle after starting in high school in Galveston, go in for a few weeks and go to Seattle, start another school, get a house, rent a house. Everything looks good. My dad's got this long-term cruise. We figure we're going to be there for at least a year or so. And it's a good job, and we're all happy. We're always happy when he leaves.
Mm-hmm.
He sends the allotment home and stays gone. That's what we want.
Mm-hmm.
So, boom, he packs up and he's gone, and we're just all so delighted. And that night, my dad shows up. He got drunk, and they threw him off the ship.
Oh, no.
So now here he is with a case of whiskey and no job, and he's hanging around the house, and he liked to gamble, liked to play cards, and he loved to cheat. Oh, he's a total scoundrel. He'd cheat openly, and then when you accuse him of it, he'd get mad and want to fight you, you know?
Just no winning. Just no winning with him, I guess. Huh?
So there we were playing cards because we didn't have a TV. We were entertaining ourselves in the kitchen. And my dad was making an ass out of himself and cheating. And we were accusing him of it. And he got mad. We had an old rickety old kitchen table, and he reached down and he just snapped the leg right off the table, wham, like that, put it back like a baseball bat, and then he whacked my mother right across the face with it, just side of the head, boom, knocked her out of the chair. Holy moly. So I'm 15, and I get up and get between them and try to calm everything down. And my mom's whole side of her face is purple, and it's just a horrible thing. And she's okay, though. She's up, and I don't even think she was crying at that time. She's pretty tough.
Mm.
But, so things were uneasy, and I remember we went to bed, and things started flaring up again. I could hear my mom and Dad fighting. And so I went down, and when I got into the bedroom, he had her arms behind her back, twisted and like that, and they were face to face. And when I came in, they were fighting about something, and he wouldn't let her go, and she reached over and bit his nose, bit a chunk of his nose off. And he let go, and she jumped up, grabbed her coat, and went to the kitchen, out the door, and my dad was behind her, and I was behind him, And on the way through the kitchen, he grabbed a butcher knife.
Oh.
And when he went to the door, he was just in his skivvies, and it was December, and it was snowing outside in Seattle. So he stopped at the kitchen door, turned, and I was standing there, and he says, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Nowhere. I'm not going anywhere." So, I turned around and kind of went back to my room and waited my opportunity to get out of the house. The reason I told that story is the last time we ever lived together as a family was that night. And so I finally got out. When I did, my mom had been hiding. She had nowhere to go. She wasn't adapted like I was. I was at 15 more capable of doing stuff because I was used to it. Anyway, so she was hiding behind a house down the street, and I came out, and she got my attention, and off we went. We got to a phone. I called a friend from high school, and I think we took the bus in Seattle. He took a lot of buses around. And we took the bus over to their house and spent the night there, and ultimately, we sort of moved in with this family, which was in somewhat of a disarray. It was a bad move, but we were helpless.
Right.
And I remember being exploited by those bastards anyway, because they got some contract jobs I remember I worked 2 weeks on one of the islands out in Puget Sound. There was a barracks. They got a contract to clean the windows. They just built this new barracks, and all the windows were all screwed up, right? So it's a menial task. But so this guy did, and he bid me and his son, and we went out there and busted our ass for like 2 weeks, 8 hours a day, and we got $5 out of the deal, I think, something like that. I was so pissed off.
So you go to the house looking for help, and he says, "Sure."
Anyway, I remember that incident. Another incident it was very important in my life. During that, while we were in Galveston, Texas, my dad is off the ship, money's free, he gives me some money. He ended up giving me a $100 bill. I never had a $100 bill in my life. So I stashed it in my wallet, which had nothing in it, and in a secret compartment, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And I carried it with me all summer. I never broke. I wasn't going to bust that 100. And I walked instead of took a bus and stuff. And as my dad burned through his money towards the end of summer, he comes out, he says, "Whatever happened to that 100? And I was so proud. I said, "Well, I got it right here, Dad." And I pulled it out. And he said, "Give it to me." And he took it.
Just like that.
Just like that. And that was a financial lesson that set my course for the rest of my life about
Really?
how I think about money. That's why money is not important to me.
And what was the lesson that you learned from that?
Well, that trying to save and hoard money didn't yield anything. There was no net result. In fact, I ended up losing it all.
Right.
So had I turned it into some material thing, I would probably still had that. Now I'm just extrapolating. I couldn't, that because I didn't expect that question. But I know that made a huge impact on how I dealt with money the rest of my life. I actually put money as less significant in my life. And I keep trying to tell people that money comes to me, but I'm not a cheapskate. I tip good. I give it out, and it just comes right back. And I know people, man, they squeeze every dime, and they agonize over money.
It's funny how that works.
But that was the lesson, and that was when it happened, and it changed my life about dealing with money. And it was a good lesson, it turned out. I mean, maybe I'm just looking at a silver lining in all the clouds, but I'd say it was a good lesson. And so was a lot of the other ones that appeared bad at the time.